The DIESOL podcast,
Developing innovation in English as a second or other language.
episode 95, interview with Greg Foreman, EdTech trainer.
Welcome to Diesel. We are your hosts. I'm Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes. Hey, Brent.
How's it going?
Yep, nothing's changing. Still chugging. Still chugging.
Still checking. All right. So, Michelle, you found us a wonderful guest today. So let's jump in, I think.
So today I'm really excited to have a colleague of mine, Greg Foreman. He was born and raised in Huntsville, Alabama, ice hockey capital of the South. He bought his first computer, an Apple IIe. Is that how you call the original Apple IIe in 1982? He's got a BS in math, an MA in psychology, a Tesol certificate, over 10 years as a high school math teacher. So automatic respect right there for the math and the high school. And then I guess triple because over 10 years. 6 years in IT, technical training and support, 10 years in professional development, concentrating in technology training. And now he focuses on educational technology. And that is how we met. And so I just didn't ever think he would say yes to the show. And I don't know why, but Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, Greg. So lots of different sections to your background here. Michelle kind of gave this overview, but can you kind of share a little bit about how this all melts together? Because they're cool combinations, right? When you're talking about like psychology and math and TESOL and training and all these things, how do you think they've all kind of melted together for you to kind of bring you to where you are now?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. Of course, it started, with my first computer, learning to code way back in the early 80s. And then I decided to be a math major while I was in college and did some programming there. I was always interested in, technology. It was fun to play with, it was fun to do things with it, but there wasn't much, um, it wasn't used as much extensively as it is now in education. So I, it was more of a toy I was doing, but then once I started teaching high school math and the TI-84 when that came out and I was actually using technology to teach, that was kind of a revolution. And I actually taught a course one time where I taught them to program on their TI-84. They're writing little programs and they were
Nice.
making little games and stuff. So that's when I started really realizing that the revolution was coming and that we were going to be using more and more technology. And then later on, when I was teaching high school, the other math teachers were jealous. They were looking at my tests going, how do you draw this? How do you do this? Where do you get this? How do you make these beautiful, graphs and stuff and everything? I was like, well, there's this add-on here. Don't you have this? Don't you use this to draw these symbols and everything? And they're like, no, why don't you teach us how? So I would give little training sessions to the other math teachers to help them learn how to make pretty math tests and not just have hand drawn stuff on there. So that was kind of my beginning. And I'd actually already done some tech training before, but it was pretty dry, pretty straightforward. This is how the software is. This is the manual. Go through it. But when I started doing that and teaching people how to create stuff and doing more of that's when I realized the workshop format is what I love the most, is sitting
Mm.
down, everyone's got their own computer and say, hey, let's do this. Let's play with this. You try this. You try that. And that's when I really realized how much I enjoy helping people use technology.
Yeah, it sounds like a couple of people I know.
Yeah, that's a great way. I love that when teachers start coming to you, right? And they start saying, wait, hold on a second, I need a little help with this, I need a little help with that. And then you're like, oh, hold on, we have that kind of techie teachers have the curse of knowledge, right? And the assumption that everybody else already knows kind of what you're talking about. And even to this day, I still have to remind myself that, like, wait, step it back, step it way back, step it way back. Because my first uh thought is always to go like more advanced. It's like, oh, you probably already know this and this and this, so let's start here. And it's like, no, wait, let's take it back about 5 steps or even more. So Greg, when you're working with teachers and kind of doing the tech training, how do you figure out where you want to start with them?
Well, basically, one of the things I've learned on the journey is, if possible, when it's a small group and you kind of go around each one, but when I've had larger groups, I would break them up into different sections. But I would create surveys, based on ability so much, but based on their comfort level, how they felt about technology. I would do little surveys about how they felt, how comfortable they were, and get an idea of if there was someone that could just go with it and you could go on, and try to group those people on one side. And then the people are just like, I'm afraid I'm going to break it. I don't want to touch it. What do I do? How do I start? Where is it? What is this? What are you talking about? And those kind of people group together. And that, focusing on, like I said, is more their comfort level, how they feel about technology, not about how good they are and what they think, or have they used this before. No, it's how they felt about it, how comfortable they were, because the other group are the ones that will play with it. Because that was one of my biggest revolutions along the way. I thought everyone loved to play with technology, and discovered, no, there's this large group of people that don't even understand what that means.
Greg, I like what you're mentioning because I was telling Brent that I'm training teachers right now, and I taught them how to enter prompts into Chat GPT to build a lesson plan for a particular model. And one of the students raised his hand. He said, "I have a question, Miss. How did you become like this? This is going to sound bad, but you are so cool. You're the kind of teacher that I want to be." And I said, well, and he was dead serious. He was dead serious. This gentleman hasn't taught before, so he's a pre-service teacher, sort of new to the teaching world. Definitely embraces technology because I can see like little sparks, happening every time I do something. And I started thinking, how did I become this way? And I said, maybe it was always that I was constantly asking, why? Why do we have to do this? Why do I have to give homework? Why are my students still failing, even though I gave them homework? They did the homework, they did well on the homework. And then I realized that I'm doing what everyone else is doing. And I wanted to break some of those rules. And so I said, let me try this. And nobody's saying no. So let me push all the buttons and find out what happens. And you said that people are afraid that they're going to break something. And I remember oftentimes I tell my students, push all the buttons. You can't break it. Push all the buttons. So how do you dispel some of the myths about or the common misconceptions of technology when it comes to people who have a hard time embracing it? And I realize that's a big question, but in your experience, what works?
Well, I think you've already mentioned part of it is telling them they can touch anything. Because I read an article years ago and they said the first rule of tech training, don't touch the mouse. And I was like, okay, I get it. And like, if I'm teaching someone to use an interactive whiteboard, I'm like, here it is. And then I go sit in the back of the room and say, get up and go touch it. Touch this, touch that, do this. And that way, forcing them, they have to do it. And they'll be scared at first, but you tell them exactly. Because I think that's part of the key to the people, is just giving very clear, direct instructions for these kind of people to do simple things. And after they realize these simple things didn't break it, they might start exploring a little bit and push a button I didn't tell them to, just to see what happens.
It's funny because Brent is right when he says we always have this conversation of we've already done that. Are we going to repeat that again? Are we giving this workshop again? But it's like there's so many people new to the very basic concept of documents in the cloud, for example. And to this day, I still have teachers who have taught in a while who have not used documents in the cloud, but they're so paranoid that their document is not going to save.
Mm.
And I don't know where that trauma came from. Maybe from computers that would crash in the middle. Well, I know
That's
where
exactly where it came from. I've been through that
Yeah,
trauma.
that's exactly. I have heard that recently, very recently. I've heard
Oh
it
my
many a
goodness.
time, and I have had enough experience with CDs and DVDs that have been corrupted and gone unreadable. And I try to explain it's on the cloud, but it's not just in one place.
Your backup for the
Clouds are backed up and backed up. I mean, it's, well, no, is it safe? Is it, is OneDrive? It's like, it's not going to go away. That they are actually very saved and backed up many times. But I
Yeah.
said, but if you want to make a copy on a DVD, go ahead, please, feel free.
If you can find a DVD writer these days, right?
Right. That's the hard part.
So, Greg, I want to go back to you were talking about this, this idea of like, hey, just go ahead and touch the board, touch the computer, get it going, right? I think one of the big things that so many teachers need here is just the permission to do it, right? It's not so much like there's so many other parts to it that like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to do this right or I'm going to do that wrong, but it's like just being told by someone, hey, it's okay, just try it and see what happens, right? That to me like releases a lot of the shackles, I guess, of the concern, and just being told that you can do it and that it's not going to make a problem. Like it's significantly difficult to break a computer or like by typing or by pushing buttons or anything like that, right? It almost can't be done, and then usually a quick fix to bring it all back. But what's your experience in that area where it's like you're I like how you're focused in on how people feel about it, how they're like how they're concerned, and do you get that same type of impression?
Yes, definitely. Interesting enough, I had an experience years ago when I was getting my TESOL certification, and I was doing the seminar right before I was finishing up, and we would go in, and one of us would teach the ESL class, and the rest would observe and come back and discuss it and everything. And only two of us had actually taught in the classroom before. So I went in and taught, and they came back and, oh, good job, fine. And then one of the other people, I was a math major. They were English majors. They were going to go teach English, and they got in front of the class, and I was like, something's not right. Something's not right. And I realized they were doing pure sage on the stage. They were ignoring the students.
Mm.
You were there for the students. And I've taken that same thing to the tech training. I've said, how are they reacting? What are they doing? What do they need? And anytime any good teacher is going to adapt to their classes and see their needs. And like I said earlier, I think just that clear, direct question saying, do this way, and just keep working and see how well they do. And sometimes you can let them go pretty soon and go, oh, try this. Just try drawing on there. Try doing this and see where they go. And, but sometimes you have to keep giving the direct instructions to some of them. But they've always come back to me later and asked me more questions, what I found. And they say thank you and they really appreciate it. So I actually enjoy the lower level. The ones that have the biggest fears are the ones I've enjoyed the most, and I get the most satisfaction and gratification from working with that level.
Yeah, and I I want to bring this all back because now to modern times, today's day, we're having a lot of these conversations around AI, of course, right? And
Right.
and I'm not sure if the teachers you're working with are embrace or questioning that or where they're at, and we could talk about that in a minute too. But because you said that you were one of the first ones or early adopters of bringing in the TI-82 or it was TI-84 TI-84 into your class or into your work, and a lot of people still are drawing parallels between that and the AI conversation. They're saying, well, math classes had to figure out how to deal with having computer or having, calculators inside of their classes when those came out. And they did that 20 years ago, and math classes still exist. And now, so it's now the AI being able to talk and, do all the language production, all these things is the same for, English classes. Do you find that parallel to be apt, or is it missing anything, or because you've been through both of those stages, or you're in I guess we're all in this second stage right now, but I'm interested because not a lot of people who say that were actually teaching math or taught math with calculators at the time.
Right. No, I haven't thought of it that way before, but I agree completely. Funny thing happened one time. A student, she was in my math class and said, "Guess what, Mr. Foreman? I went up 30 points on the math part of my SAT." I was like, "Oh, great." And she goes, "You know what I think it was?" I was goes, "What?" "I was late getting there and I left my calculator in the car."
Really?
And it made me realize that, and I'd seen it in my classes because they would keep begging to use the calculator. "You don't need it; it's not going to help." But no, I need it. I need it. It was a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
They were using it as a crutch. And I kept telling them, if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know the order of operations, you can't use a calculator. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know how. And it's not going to be useful at all. It's a very, very useful tool if you know how to use it. And AI is something similar. It can be wonderful, useful, but if you don't understand how it works and you're not aware of hallucinations and things like that, um, you're going to be in big trouble. So, as you probably said, you may have said it on one of yours, I'm not sure, but basically, AI is not replacing humans. Humans who use AI Humans who don't use AI are going to be replaced by
Yeah.
humans who do use AI.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tool. It's the same way. If you're just trying to do all your calculations by hand, like we did to put man on the moon,
Mhm.
instead of using the computers that can do it in a fraction of the time, you're just not going to be able to keep up. And it's the same kind of thing.
I
And
think, oh,
but you
go ahead.
have to, it takes a while to understand how the technology works. That's what we're going through. A lot of people are getting good at the prompt engineering. There's courses out there now you can take online, Coursera and stuff like that for prompt engineering. But to me, it always reminds me of how you can Google. I'd always tell people, "Oh, just Google it," and they say I couldn't find it. I'm like, and I'll put one couple words in, and it'll pop up at the top of the list. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about using those words.
Mm-hmm.
That brings me to something that happened this week again in my training teachers class. A student happened to walk in while I was explaining. I had this slide on the board that had the content that the students needed to input in order to get that chat GPT output the way that we wanted it. And then at the bottom it said revise. You're going to have multiple revisions because of first, something like that. And another teacher walked in and said, "You're teaching them chat GPT?" And I said, "Yeah, what?" I'm helping them how to know how to cut down on the amount of revision time that it's going to take. And he said, "Well, what's going to happen when they don't have that? What if it crashes?" And I said, it doesn't replace the knowledge of what a lesson plan, the parts that a lesson plan should include, your warm up, your materials, etc. They still have to do it, but this is going to help them to be more efficient and have more energy, because teachers usually don't have a lot of time. So spend more energy developing the materials that you're going to use. But I left feeling that was a skeptic, and I feel like they'll come back and they might have more questions. But I felt like, again, repeating the fact that if we don't know how to use these tools, you run the risk of what we saw during the pandemic, where it's that gap that was created of the people that didn't know how to use technology, and they were so afraid, and it was just hard. It was hard for everyone, but it was just hard at the beginning. And so again, here's a new tool, a much more powerful tool, And if the gap gets big enough, and because at the speed this is advancing at is so fast, the gap already was yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, interesting. I think it's important to remind everyone that it's a tool, and those of us who know how to use a tool are safe from whatever's coming. But elimination, I guess, when if you don't know how to use a tool.
Yeah,
Well,
for
the
sure.
thing, yeah, the thing I'm most concerned about right now, it's not, I'm not worried about ChatGPT taking over the world, of course, but what I'm just seeing, what's been coming, and I think this is the beginning of just the speed at which things are going to change
Mm-hmm.
is just picked up, and being agile and adapt, being able to adapt to this. And there's just so the tech training is going to have to be just as agile and adapt and come along to help people adapt every couple of months. It could be once a quarter. We might be really having to help people understand some new part of technology, be it AI or whatever, just because of the rate at which things, I just see it, how quickly it's going to be changing now due to this revolution. And I think that's where training in general, tech training, educational technology training has to be ready and adapt the way it's doing what it's doing. And you can't look, you don't know what's going to be there in the long run. So you have to be able to focus on the how you're going to get your training, get a good agile framework ready. So you're just able to do it on the run and be ready for whatever comes your way.
Mm-hmm. It's
You
funny
know,
you
is there
mentioned that.
go ahead, Brent.
I was thinking earlier today about how fast things are moving, right? And I was thinking that this idea that, now it's exponential, right? And so the average person might make a guess about when something's going to come out, right? And it's like, okay, it's going to be, I think it'll be about 5 years until this thing comes out. I think it'll be about 8 months or something until that comes out, right? And so and people are just guessing. So this is not a scientific backed thing. It's just something I was floating in my head earlier. But I think that pretty much anything that the average person is guessing, you need to just switch the time frame from down one. So if you think it's going to be 5 years, it's going to be 5 months. If you think it's going to be 8 months, it's going to be 8 weeks. Right? If you think it's going to be 10 weeks, it's going to be 10 days, right? And so like it's just moving so fast and so crazy. Like just today I saw that Samsung made an announcement that their new Galaxy phones built into the phones are going to do live translation, live spoken translation as you talk on the phone. So, I have so many students that say, I'm fine. I'm okay with like my regular speaking English if I'm in front of someone, but I always see when I get on the phone, it's so much harder for me. And I don't see any reason why those students wouldn't choose to just go, okay, click the button, and now I don't have to worry about it. I can just speak in, Farsi, or I can speak in whatever language, and then just speak in English to the person that I'm calling on the phone. That's a reality that's being put into this next generation and is announced today, I guess. And so fascinating to see how fast things are moving, and I think none of us are really prepared for it.
I'm not, I know that.
Well, all the and again, that's going to come with fears and unfound, well, maybe both founded and unfounded fears.
Mm-hmm.
I think, what was I? It's been a year since Chat GPT, but AI has been around for a while. It just now became a mainstream household term, right? Now my mom knows what Chat GPT is. She doesn't know how to use it, but she knows what it is. And it's been a year. So where are we going to be in the new year? I
Oh,
mean,
one more year? Yeah.
yeah, I can't even think a year is just so much growth.
Yeah, wildly different. And so Greg, since we're talking about some of these tools and things, and it doesn't have to be AI, it can be anything, but I think it's always fun just to get into it a little bit with the teachers and with the trainers about like when you're working with other teachers, what tools, what are the actual things that you're sharing, especially for language teachers? Like, what are the things that you're seeing that are fun, that are engaging, that people are liking, that you're wanting to play with more, or you're wanting to have students play with more on a regular basis?
Wow, there's such a broad, I mean, Ishal knows there's so many different things. And I think it gets back to we want to be able to introduce everyone to all these different tools. But we want the instructors or users to have the choice of which ones they prefer.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the toolbox, you mentioned toolbox, and I've always been interested in that, metaphor using about the toolbox. And people say, I get more tools in a toolbox. But I just see people putting tools in their toolbox. And I'm like, you got that, you put that in there. Do you even know what that's for? Do you know how to use it? When to use it?
A hoarder, a
And
digital hoarder.
yeah, people go to trainings and they learn. That's why I like having demos, workshops, um, things like that. I prefer when doing educational technology as opposed to a course class and doing that. Just say, hey, here's something you can look at, and that helps me kind of gauge. There seems to be a lot of interest in this one. I think I will, offer some workshops and then see how those go and stuff like that. Um, I think some of the things that have gotten good is like the things based on like a corpus, like a Uglish kind of thing.
Mm.
The power that we're able to bring in. I mean, of course, the large language models are that too, just the vast amounts of data which we have at our fingertips now, and we're learning how to harness and use that. And the way Uglish works, I think, is the really interesting and be able to find, a context, the best context for learning a particular vocabulary word. Here is a YouTube video that uses it in context, and it is the most likely context based on what we have found. It's used in this context a lot, those kind of things. And I think it's kind of because the AI is doing something similar. It just has vast amounts of data, and they're building these transformers, and it's figuring all this stuff out. And I think that's the tools that a lot of people seem to be excited about is the ones that are able to just, because that's what computers are good about doing a repetitive task very quickly over and over, and analyzing terabytes of data is not that hard for it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the ones I see people being more interested in right now. But it's the whole gamut, because you have the people with that, but you have the one that just want to figure out how to use Microsoft Teams.
Yeah. Well, I'm still stuck on that one. Geez, it's Microsoft is still actually Microsoft is making some really interesting products these days, and so a lot of their accelerated learners and those types of things are really, really cool, but they still have a lot of bloat in their older, more traditional software, and it's just so hard to figure out some of those things. But I want to go back to Uglish for a second, just because I find Uglish is such a great example of what teachers really, really want, which is a single purpose, easy to use, no frills tool. And it's like, and everybody,
Foolproof, that one, right?
it's
Like,
amazing. It's
what are you
foolproof.
gonna do? Check all the accents on accident, all the English accents. That's
It's
like as
been
far as
yeah, and it's been basically the same for the last 10-15 years, however long it's been around, right? There hasn't been a lot of major changes to it, but it's so reliable, and it's like the opposite of what all the ed tech companies are doing, which is we need to have the everything tool,
yeah.
Canva. You can do everything, and throw the kitchen sink at it too, and we'll add more to it, right? And it's like, okay, or Flipgrid or Flip, and it's like, okay, we're adding this and this and this and this and 100 different possible things that you can do. And then it's like Uglish, it's like you can do this one thing, and you can do it really, really well all the time without ever guessing about what it's going to look like the next time you come back in. And I think that's something I wish that more ed tech companies would take a lesson from that, because it's a really, it's just so great and so reliable. And I don't have any qualms about saying, oh, well, I don't know what it's like now, but like, 4 months ago when I checked it, you were able to do this, or those types of conversations that really come along with training teachers a lot, because it's hard for us to keep on top of every single thing all the time. But in that case, like, I love that reliability, and I wish that more of the ed tech companies kind of were a little bit more singular instead of trying to be the everythings.
Yeah, that's a good point because your toolbox gets filled up with these multifunction tools, and it makes it harder to figure out what's best in this situation because you're like,
Mm-hmm.
should I go in there and use their tool or in this one and use their similar tool? It's not, and like you said, when it's one function, one thing, this is when I need to use a tool. It's more obvious and do it. But what happens, of course, someone has their set of tools and they say, oh, everyone's using that one. So I'm going to make something like that and
Mm-hmm.
put it in what I'm offering. And that just confuses people. And, I think my hardest thing, I can get people to use something different, new, brand new or whatever. But the hardest thing to do is when someone has a tool that will do what they need to do, but there is a tool, there's another one that's come around, has been around for 10 years, that's actually a lot better what they're currently using. It might be able to do 5 times as things that the current tool they're using, and getting them to let go of that old screwdriver that's all worn out and really not working well, but they just love it. And there's this brand new screwdriver that they could use that would work so much better. But convincing them to do that is the hardest thing, to getting the resistors to actually let go. And that's where you got to offer it. That's the thing, not being mandatory. Offer, say, hey, come look at this. Try this out. I'm going to do a demo. Look at this, and let them see their colleagues use it and go, you know what? I mean, that's all you can do. And unfortunately, now we're just talking about things changing so quickly that they may miss the boat, and then another tool comes along even better before they even adapt that one.
Greg, I hear you describing those kind of tools, and it reminds me of you and I were talking about, the tipping point and Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, and how if something has stickiness, the teacher is going to go back to that, right? And I'm wondering what other thoughts you have related to that in the ed tech training world.
Yeah, because he taught in Tipping Point, he has the salesmen, the connectors, and the mavens. And I realized I was a maven. I love gathering information and sharing the information. I'm not a salesman, not even close. So I have to find someone to sell the stuff for me. I can't sell this technology. I think something important realizing when you're trying to um, get people to adopt to technology, just understanding what you're good at. And I know that's not what I'm good at. I'm not good at making flyers or, making like interesting title of my training or my workshop to draw people. So I have to get help to do that. Um, and I think that's one of the points of what Malcolm Gladwell is trying to do in the book, realizing it's just not one thing. It's not just one person, that it takes a village. And but the other part of that is really being self-aware of what you're good at and what your expertise is, and work on that, because that's one of the things I learned in professional development is you get much more bang for the buck. If someone's good at something, help them get even better. If someone's just can't do something, don't worry about it. Just minimal, they need to get by, but don't worry about trying to bring them up to a better level. It's just not going to work. But if they're really good at something, work on that, help them improve that. So you can find that sometimes that tool, a lot of those tools are pretty versatile and you might be able to do a lot more than you realize. And that's something that people are using some kind of technology tool, might be something simple and don't realize that there's other uses to it. And that's where you try to get in And that's the kind of thing I'm just so interested in, all this different stuff and looking for different uses, that I'm good at that. But I'm not good at selling it. So you have to be I have to have help. And I think that, this is more, like I said, it takes a village. I can't do everything. And that's part of when I've been working. I've always had a team around of people to help me, and I have to bounce off ideas and everything. And I think that's really important to helping, you know, get people to adopt things, is you got people talking to them in different ways for different reasons. And, because you got the connectors going, hey, you should really try this, to go into different people. And the salesmen that just make it sound like it's wonderful and it's great. Everyone has to have it. Everybody's going to do it. And then when they have questions, they come to me and say, okay, could you explain this? The person that really has the knowledge.
I think
Yeah, I
we're
think,
with you there, right? Like that.
yep.
I'm thinking of the show. I'm like, oh yeah, we put out like one social media post when the show comes out, and then we're like, we're good, we're done. We've talked that we sold it, that it's out there and it's available for people. And we're like, probably someone who really knows what they're doing would probably promote the show in a much different way.
All right, it is time for our fun finds, and this time I have Goose Goose Duck, which I found on Steam, but then I also found that you could download from the Apple Store. It's a free game, and if you're familiar with Among Us, it's
Among Us.
similar to Among Us, but you play in a group, and you have to find people from the other team, and you have geese and you have ducks, and you have to find the duck and kill the duck. It's a fun group game of elimination, and we need a little bit of distraction these days.
Okay, so
So
this is different than what was that one called? I think I did a couple of years ago, the Goose Game, where you're just like a wild goose messing around with people in town.
yeah,
This is a newer game.
yeah,
Okay.
this is like an elimination. I guess if you've played Mafia before, like with cards,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Like a
kind of
werewolf or
like this
something.
kind of game. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun.
Awesome. Okay, so Goose Duck.
It's free to play,
Free
so
to play.
even better.
All right.
What do you have?
So mine is a bar actually here in Kobe. It's called the
Bar.
Kazan Room, and it's a tiki bar.
It's
So
people
there
are in Japan.
there are only 3 tiki bars in Japan, I guess,
Oh
and
my
this
goodness.
this is one of the 3, and it's pretty new, and it's pretty cool because the people who built it are Americans, and so they brought in the whole tiki culture, and they're doing the whole like custom drinks and everything. And it's just nice. It's like a mellow place, but I've learned a little bit more, and I knew this to some degree, but tiki bars have their own whole massive culture about
I
like,
don't think I've been to a tiki bar.
okay, so it's interesting. There's like a whole different way of doing things in a tiki bar, and so they have all their mixed drinks, their tiki drinks, like often rum based or whatever drinks. But then they like have memberships into the bars. So like once you've had all the drinks, then you become a member of the bar, and then like they've got, and they try and teach people about what that culture looks like and what it means. And so it's a pretty cool place, and it's very mellow. And so if you happen to be traveling through Kobe, you can look up the Kazan Room, Kazan, and just have, one or two nice, mellow, tropical drinks, even if it's not tropical weather, even if it's in the middle of winter. So the Kazan Room is my recommendation.
Cool. Greg, what's your fun find?
Well, once upon a time, a friend and I were on the Black Sea in the Republic of Georgia, and they have like these tents on the beach. They kind of back up. They're restaurants, but they're just like tents they have on there and do that. And one time we walked into one, we said, oh, let's try this. We go in there and we sit down. And I started looking around. I was going, hold it. It was everything in there was about Frida Kahlo.
In
It was
Georgia?
such a culture. I was going, Frida Kahlo. I'm like, I'm not in Mexico. I'm in the Republic of Georgia. What is going on here? And I actually asked, waiter, what's this? Oh, yeah, the owners. They weren't there. The owner, yeah, she's she loves Frida Kahlo, and there was just like everything around was all about Frida Kahlo, and it just and the funny thing that happened in that same place was my friend and I, we started talking to a couple, and I said, no, I'm from Alabama, and there was a group of young kids over here. One of them had a guitar, and a little while later, all of a sudden, the guy gets the guitar and starts playing Sweet Home Alabama. Needless to say, that was a very fun night. Met a lot of fun people and everything, and had a great time at that little restaurant on this tent with Frida Kahlo all over. It just turned out to be that kind of magical evening you did not expect.
Awesome. So
Who would
the
expect that?
cross-cultural Frida Kahlo tent restaurant in Georgia for anybody who happens to be swinging by. We've got a wide. Everybody's gonna have to do a lot of traveling to get to all of our things this time around. So
Yeah.
Georgia, Japan, and well, I guess you could play the goose game anywhere. So that's good. So you can play it on the flight between countries. All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Greg.
All right, we are on YouTube. Share the show, buy us a coffee, support us through Patreon, leave a review, or give us a shout out. You could still win a one-of-a-kind diesel pin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
As we change things around, we have to figure out how we're going to talk. So yeah, great. The show notes and everything else is available at diesel.org. You can find us at VoiceHead Canada. We're on all the podcasting platforms, and YouTube's going pretty well, I think, Michelle. We're getting some responses over there. Yeah, and I've been putting up some videos also for the AI and ESL website as well a little bit, and so sharing some interesting things over there that I'm trying to explore.
Maybe we'll be on Twitch one day.
Oh, maybe.
Not roll that out yet.
On most platforms, you can find me at Brent G. Warner.
I'm Ixy_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY. And Greg, where's a good place where our listeners can find you?
You can reach me in my Gmail account. It's gforeman64@gmail.com. That's GFOREMAN64. In Spanish, thank you is gracias. Gracias for tuning into the Diesel podcast.
And gracias for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.